So another thing that I think makes the series really unique is its characters. For my money, Breath of Fire has the single best characters of any JRPG series on the planet, and I
Agree.
say that as a huge Final Fantasy fan. Uh, there are very few characters from the series that I don't love, or at least find very memorable. And I find this very fascinating because one of the things that I think makes them unique, aside from the fact that they're obviously anthropomorphic, they're sort of animal people, is that despite this animal theme, the characters are very real. They unlike again the characters in Final Fantasy who are struggling with these very kind of nebulous universal concerns about crystals and these villainous empires and things like this. The characters in Breath of Fire are typically dealing with real problems. They're poor. They're facing being orphaned in the case of Ryu 2, right? They don't have enough food to eat. Ryu and Tipo and Ray in 3 are very seriously struggling to put food on the table, and then you have characters like
And
like
paying
Ox from the
rent.
first game. Right, they're having trouble paying rent. They're being carted around in garbage cans because they're being accused of theft, and things like this. And it's comical, which is another great thing about the series we're going to talk about in a minute, is just the sheer humor of it. But some of these things are very farcical and over the top, but they still feel very real, I think, in a way that the Mana series and Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger do not. They and it strikes a really unique balance because Breath of Fire can be very lofty and deal with some very lofty themes, but it brings it down to earth with real humor and earthiness. It feels real despite all of the bigger themes.
I do want to mention that I think it's a general Capcom thing. I think that Capcom has a great way to write characters, especially characters from around the world. They feel real. They feel their own being, like they're developed and being known. And as you mentioned previously about Ryu and Bo handling troubles, I think that every character from any game has dealt with a lot of subject, being Katt dealing with the idea that she doesn't really understand who she is. She never saw another of her creature. Or Nina had, from Breath of Fire 1, had to deal with the fact that her father was sick, and she knew like the whole kingdom is like lying on her shoulder. And you have Bo that is caught, Bo from Breath of Fire 1, that is caught in the middle of two races semi-truce, where like one city tried to destroy the other because they don't understand each other. The other think that they are a monster, and a lot of very lovable even enemies. For example, Cor or Carla from Breath of Fire 1, who's a monster girl and can find her own place, and that's why she turned like to the Empire. So even though they are creatures that don't resemble us, I always feel like Breath of Fire, different races in a sense, can just sit very nicely in any futuristic type of games where you deal with a lot of
Yes, it
space race and aliens,
it
but they
touches on
still
on
feel
things like
real.
like tribalism and cultural identity in a very unique and very relatable way. And it's a fun, fascinating way to do it. And I also agree with your point about how Capcom tends to feel more global because you go back to Street Fighter 2, right? The World Warriors
Exactly.
were from all across the world,
Exactly.
and that was something that fighting games at the time weren't really doing.
And
So
and
yeah,
not just that. I mean, other series like Power Stone, they nail it pretty good. I feel like Capcom knows how to write character that has different identity and different races, and even different genders. So um, I think I think first of all, I really want to mention that like it's very good that it's been written by people like Capcom. Um, now, even though there are humans in Breath of Fire series, they're still debatable. because they still seem to have some kind of lingering traces. My issue is that Capcom really didn't know what to do with it. Like, what exactly going on? Are there humans or creatures that appear to be less having amorphic animalist type of thing? So it's very confusing, but aside of that, they still feel real. They still feel part of the culture. They still feel exactly like elves or drow or other creature from, I don't know, Star Trek or Wars universe be in an alien like corresponds. So it works, and it works great because they are not just dead for the sake of being a character. Like I still feel like in Final Fantasy, for example, they creating a creature for the sake of creating creature, bunny woman or cat humans just for the sake of it, or even Fire Emblem does it, but with Breath of Fire it feels like it's part of the world. It's just that they just look different.
It does feel more like it springs naturally from
Yeah.
the nature of this world and this mythology that they've created.